Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great having you here.
It's great to be here.
Lisa Bennett
That's
from
right.
Cultura.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I I've been in marketing for a long time now. Started in high tech in about 2000 as kind of growing up through the ranks at Toyota way back when, which is an anti-fraud company that I kind of grew up in and then evolved from. For the last bar mitzvah years, about 13 years, I've been at Cultura, which is a video technology company, and we provide video solutions for pretty much any video use case you can think of. It's an up-and-coming, or I would say booming area with video pretty much everywhere. So it's cool to have a platform that kind of goes across all the different industries and use cases. I've kind of gone back and forth between Israel and New York a couple of times, which I love. And for the past 3 years I've been here, most recently focused on corporate marketing for Cultura, which is a fun and exciting role that we kind of created a few years ago to try to fit into the different areas that Cultura was working in, and it's been lots of fun. So
great. So first of all, shout out to great people working at Cultura, and Ron Yekutiel is a dear friend, and a lot of great people working there. So
absolutely, thank
well
you.
done, HR of Cultura.
2 words maybe about Cultura for the ones who don't know.
Sure. So Cultura, we provide a video platform, which basically, as you guys know, video is literally everywhere. My 14-year-old daughter definitely uses video a lot more than any other medium these days. And there's a lot of technology behind the scenes when you talk about video. So Cultura basically provides the full stack of APIs that can enable videos and video streaming, video technology of all sorts, but we also provide a lot of front-end solutions. So, for example, one of our best-selling products is our out-of-the-box YouTube, so to speak. So any companies such as SAP, Oracle, many others, they use our solution in order to have their own private video portal, which helps them collaborate with their employees and helps them use video internally. And we have a lot of other cool solutions, like a video email messaging solution, which is called Pitch. So instead of sending a boring old email that everyone sends 3 million of a day, you actually send a pitch video email and a video message, and it gets a lot more recipients and a lot more engagement, and you can actually track what people are watching and if they're forwarding it, so it's a lot more effective than regular email. We do live webcasting. I'd say that's one side of the business, which is our enterprise and learning side. And then the other side is even sexier when it comes to cloud TV, which is kind of a white label Netflix that we provide. We power Vodafone TV across about 8 countries around the world. We power solutions for Turner and Vion and some of the biggest operators and media companies.
Well done. That's a great
Thank you. It was all
No.
me.
great milestone.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right, so let's start.
All right.
On our first round, we call it the quick round. We're going to ask you quick questions, and you're going to answer quick answers without thinking. So let's start. Asaf.
What's your favorite marketing tool?
I'd have to say that recently I'm enjoying LinkedIn PPC a lot.
Yeah.
While I'm not necessarily doing the nitty-gritty myself, I've been working with an amazing guy, and it's super interesting and fun to be able to kind of see the results in real time, people that answer, people that won't click on the ads, what do we change, and the numbers all going up. And I know it sounds trivial, but the
platform is definitely experiencing a complete remake. So Microsoft's work is definitely felt. So
it's really, really cool. And in general, I think that interestingly, even though Kaltura is a fun and cool place, our marketing traditionally was more kind of email-based and events and on more kind of traditional enterprise sales focused, even on the marketing side. So now we're getting a lot more into kind of that digital age, which we were kind of a little bit slower than many others that actually started that way. And are now going backwards into kind of the more traditional marketing. So for us, it was a bit, since we started over a decade ago, it's a relatively newer area for us, and I'm loving it. So that's
All right,
Yeah.
nice. Favorite tech brand?
oof, that's a tough one. Um,
Apple is not allowed.
Not allowed.
I like Drift. Actually,
Yeah.
Sweet. Are you using
Yeah.
Drift?
we recently started using Drift. We have yet to see how effective it'll be, although they definitely tell a great story, and I'm sure it's effective in various ways. We
It's a
still
very
have
cool
to figure out.
experience, you know, on the sort of user side.
Absolutely,
amazing.
absolutely, and they have really cool features. Like you can get very granular.
They have really cool brand.
Yeah, exactly. Their CMO is so vocal, and I love that. I also like Sisense, I have to say, and Taboola. But not everyone can have a Singolda, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's just something that's, you're either born with that kind of outgoing and marketing social type of persona or not. So,
Yeah.
but I like to follow what he does as well.
Your favorite tech commercial, if
Oh,
there is one
gosh.
you can think of.
The truth is that I don't watch commercials very much.
I'm with you, but
I'm trying to, I saw the question ahead of time and I was like, oh, what tech commercial? I guess it's not tech, but I recently saw a cool Nike commercial about women empowerment. And
Yeah.
we're just launching in a couple of days a gender equality in tech. By the time this is aired, I can
Yeah,
actually plug
yeah.
this, but Cultura is actually launching a new initiative around gender equality in tech.
Awesome.
And we are committing to getting within the next 5 years to 50% women in our workforce. We're at about
Amazing.
30% now. It's actually quite staggering when you look at some of the statistics of where salary compensation and all that good stuff. So I saw the Nike commercial.
It's only crazy till you do it. That one?
Yeah, with Serena Williams and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I debate about, I would say haflaya metakenet to some extent. Like I really feel in anything in politics, and it doesn't matter what, that people should be valued for who they are and not necessarily because they have saved a spot for a woman.
Yeah.
But on the other
Right.
hand, as a woman, I realize that that might be a bit naive. So it's so anyway, we're launching a petition, and I will be sending it around and want everyone to sign that we
Amazing.
support gender equality in tech.
well
So,
done, Cultura.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice.
We're trying.
All right. Favorite non-tech brand?
Favorite non-tech brand? Ooh.
Apple not allowed. Once again.
Wow, that's a great question. Favorite non-tech brand? It should just pop out at me, right? I like the Crocs brand,
Yeah,
actually.
Mhm.
that's a good one.
I like the Crocs brand, and I'm sure there are more that are not popping into my head at the moment. But definitely, I like that one.
Inbound or outbound?
Outbound.
Online
think.
or offline?
Online.
Sweet.
Outbound.
Online. Definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. So that sort of sums up the fire question part of the show.
I hope I did
Fairly
okay.
new. Yeah. Well, I hope so.
Still on beta.
Yeah. So now we've got the great achievement and the glorious failure corner, and well, we can start.
Start with the achievement, yeah.
I was thinking the other way around, but whatever.
Cool.
Great achievement.
Great achievement. So I know that today we wanted to talk a little bit later on about analyst relations.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a topic that I know a lot of marketers and technologists struggle with. So a great achievement that I thought of sharing is actually on the analyst relations side of things. And that is in the last Gartner critical capabilities, which is, for those of you that deal with analysts or not, that the holy grail is what we call the Gartner Magic Quadrant, right? That ranks
Also known
vendors-
as
Yeah.
MQ.
the MQ, right?
For the ones who know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So along with most Gartner MQs, there's also something called the CC, which is the
Yeah.
Critical Capabilities Report. So Kaltura, thankfully, has gotten into working with analysts a long time ago. I did that at Toyota as well, and I brought that knowledge over as along with the team over to Gartner. Over to Cultura. And just recently in the last MQ, we were leaders yet again. And that's I think our fourth or fifth time to be in the leaders quadrant of our specific space. But the cooler thing was that in the critical capabilities, we were the highest ranked in all 4 use cases that were surveyed and looked at.
So that's amazing.
Yeah, it's
rare.
like it's very rare, and it's almost like feels like, wait a minute, maybe they should have thought before they did that. No, but honestly, it was. I mean, obviously, we feel that that's the truth, and that's the way the market is really shaping up, and there are a lot of reasons why we feel that way, and it's definitely credible from our perspective. Across any way you look at it, but it was amazing to see. And then in another report that talked specifically about kind of the cloud TV world, the streaming world, again, by Strategy Analytics, we were ranked with the top scores, and this was against billion-dollar companies like Huawei and Ericsson and Cisco and others. So for us to be making an impact in the analyst community is a big deal, because many of our customers actually read the reports and follow these things. So those, I think, were some great achievements.
So we'll dive into that in a lot more detail, because I think this is a topic that's, at least from what I see, many people are interested in, and they're not quite sure how it works, and everybody wants to be a cool vendor or a leader in the MQ,
or at least a visionary.
Yeah, or at least somewhere. But
somewhere on the grid.
Yeah, just show me somewhere.
Right.
So we'll get to that. And now,
the biggest failure.
Glorious
before we
failure.
do that.
But what makes it glorious is that you've learned something from it.
I hope this is a good enough one.
We'll tell you.
It was hard to think of, actually, because we haven't launched grandiose, crazy campaigns for billions of dollars and whatnot. Where we have a very startup kind of grunge mentality in a lot of ways. But I think one thing was that we launched several different tools. So back in the day, there was a really cool tool called Insightera, which was later bought by Marketo, and then there were other tools that we bought along the way. And I think one of the things that I learned is that there are a million marketing tools out there, and each one of them has got a specific goal and a specific niche. But at the end of the day, if you don't know how to use them, or if you don't have the resources, which is usually the bigger problem to use them, then you will fail. So with Insightera, for example, and what now is Marketo RTP, it's just one example, and it's an amazing technology. It really is amazing. But we utterly failed at it. Like, we bought it, we were excited about it, we were pumped, and it was just a total failure. And it wasn't the fault of the technology at all. It was my own fault at the time for thinking that I had the resources and the capacity and the time to actually deal with it. And I think my biggest lesson from that was that, every cool and shiny new tool that comes along, that's great, but you have to be very selective, both from a budget perspective, but even more so from a resource perspective on what you can actually dive into. And I think that that's something that we learned more than once. This is just a small example, but you get excited, you see the demo, they give you a free trial, it's all cool, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, we haven't touched this thing for months. What is it doing there?
So it's great insight. I think many people fall into that trap. Insightera specifically, it's an amazing technology.
And I know Mike and
one
the
that
team
one
there,
that
and I love
makes
it.
so much sense. How come internet today is still sort of one size fits all for everyone?
That's
How does that make sense?
That's right.
So
and by the way, we actually
personalize-
still use it with Marketo, through Marketo RTP, and I know the team there, and they're amazing, and they've had great success because it's great technology. But at the time, and now we use it a lot better, but at the time, when we were trying to grow, I think that the moral of the story is just be careful with stretching your resources to places that they can't stretch. But on the other hand, don't lose that exploration mode. So,
it's a fine balance. And, everybody promises you, just put those
Right,
2
of
lines of
course.
JavaScript in your site. And then all the magic will happen.
Try to assess how complex it is to learn, not how cool it is
To learn
and to maintain.
Maintenance mode is tough.
is amazing. And I love cool new marketing things. We're working with Trendyman now. We're working with a lot of different cool technologies. But I now I'm a lot more wary about what we dive into before, unless I know how we're going to tackle it and try. And we don't always succeed even today. So.
Cool.
All right.
That's great.
To the main topic.
The main topic today is Analyst Relations,
Yes.
also known as AR, by people who know what they're doing.
People who knows what's MQ.
Yeah. So there's so many misconceptions I personally come across, and I'm sure you know a lot of them yourself. So I don't know, what are the main ones that you can name that you feel people need to know it's not really the case?
Well, I have to say, I think analyst relations is like this big enigma. And I think to some extent people feel like it's not effective and that it's very expensive. And that it's almost like this box out there that you don't necessarily want to dive into, especially not as a small young company or as a startup. I think that despite my attempts over the years to not feel like it has an impact, it does. As much as I've tried to say to myself, there's no way that this has a big impact, at the end of the day, we see that it does. It simply does.
What do you see?
We see that when we are included in a Magic Quadrant or a Forrester Wave or a report by Strategy Analytics or IDC or whatnot, we see that we get good quality leads coming in, downloading those reports, and then ultimately turning into opportunities. So we see that from a content marketing perspective, for example, once you are in those reports and you leverage them for lead generation and nurture campaigns and whatnot, you actually see high quality results from them. We also hear from customers and prospects. Well, I read in this analyst report that, so-and-so whatnot, and it makes an impact. One thing that I learned after several years working on analyst relations was that most of the time that analysts spend is not on writing the reports. The majority of their time is actually on the phone with end users. So even if you think that, oh my gosh, I wasn't included in such and such report, the fact that you have been in touch with those analysts and you stay top of mind is huge. And it's really important because they're constantly getting calls, and if you work closely with the analyst firms, they can even tell you how many times your company name, for example, comes up in those calls versus your competition, etc. You see that people are asking, and these are things that you can't control. They're behind the scenes. So it's a complex world in the sense that it's not pay to play. But no one knows exactly how true that is. I mean, it is a bit complex, but they do try to keep, the commercial side away. On the other hand, if you pay and you subscribe, you get a lot more face time. So it's not pay to play, so to speak, but if I'm in front of the analyst
it's
five times
it's
more,
freemium.
right? If I'm in front of them 5 times more than my competitors, then guess what? I'm, paying to play.
I think many people don't realize, sorry.
Go ahead.
Many people don't realize that it's a relationship like any other relationship, and those are humans, unlike what some people may think on the other side, and building that and maintaining that relationship is key. So I've seen examples of companies that have won some award and then they felt like, hey, we've done what we were set out to do, and didn't pay any more attention to the analyst for the next 2 years. And obviously someone got offended on the other side, and the retaliation happened. And they didn't realize, but hey, we were so good, and all of a sudden we're down there. It's
something that you have to maintain, and you have to take, and at least for Cultura, for example, I mean, we have a broad range of analysts that cover various aspects of what we do. So we have, and if you have I would recommend, if you do sign up with one of the analyst firms, if you have a good account manager, that's critical.
I agree.
And one tip I actually will tell you is that over the past couple of years, I realized that, for example, just for Gartner specifically, we moved our account to Israel because the team here was a much better cultural fit, and Israeli, by all means, they're more get-going, they're more creative, they can help out more.
They want you to succeed and renew your membership.
Yes. And they're just, of the same material of a lot of the marketers that are here. But even with Forrester, I mean, having a good account manager, I'll give you guys an example of something that we experienced that was interesting. We had Usually at one of these firms, you'll have what they call your key analyst, someone who's covering your space specifically.
Key lead analyst.
Exactly. So our key analyst was this young, great guy, and we, spent a lot of time explaining what we do to him. He was working on what they call the Forrester wave, which is the equivalent of the MQ at Gartner. And we had the most amazing results ultimately. I mean, it was literally top right corner. You couldn't get better than that. One bright sunny day, we get a call from our good old analyst who, life is bliss. And he says, hi, I just want to let you know I'm leaving Forrester. We were like, what? What do you mean? You can't leave. We just spent 3 years
taking you to
building
dinners.
this. You can't go. Where are you going? And he went to be some, and you think of these analysts, of course, as like second to God. And he went to be some product manager at some company.
Well, that's a good thing. We, what we experience is the same thing. Hey, I'm leaving, but where am I leaving to? One of our main competitors. And you've just, spilt your entire life and all your plans for the next few years.
Oh my God. Yeah,
and we got really upset about that. And unfortunately,
there was nothing you could do.
Well, there's nothing you can do. We escalated it. But at the end of the day, they're sort of signed on non-compete and NDAs and,
right.
God knows what else, and
they're
sort of obliged to keep things, secret.
Yeah.
But
so what we did ultimately is, after we cried, I was in very, very close touch with our account manager there, and for almost, I want to say, a year, they didn't bring a replacement in it, and I felt like I was throwing money away. Like, I've got this subscription. Okay, so there's an analyst who's kind of a secondary, but no one was really covering the video space for almost a year. But they kept saying, we're going to bring someone on, and ultimately they did. And we had my account manager and I had a very clear strategy of how we are going to tackle this new analyst. And very, very quickly we got in front of him, spent time with him. And the goal was, again, and I truly believe this, if you serve as a resource for an analyst, then that's one of the best ways to create a relationship. At the end of the day, they're getting vendors, trying to throw stuff at them all the time. But they also need information. And some of the best information comes from the vendor communities. So we constantly try to serve as a resource to our analysts. And not only did we ultimately start working with them, also, regardless, on providing video solutions to several analyst firms, but at the end, I feel amazing that, an analyst will come to me and say, hey, Lisa, I've got this thing I'm working on. You guys are out there doing this. Do you have any insights to share? Can I talk to someone on the team? That's like, the dream relationship that you actually want to create with these people, but it's always, a give and take. And I'd say that's a big thing, kind of trying to create that relationship so that they realize you're going to give them value and not just do these briefings.
So you said you created a strategy for this one. What is a strategy for an analyst?
So, like I said, if you have a very good account manager, they will help you create a strategy. But at the end of the day, it's almost like any other relationship, right? These guys need to create reports. They need to know the market. They need to be able to create or to provide value to their end customers, because those are the people that they care most about at the end of the day. So by providing them with relevant information. So one trick I learned also kind of through the years is that there are two types of communications you can have with analysts in general. There's an inquiry and there's a briefing. A briefing is a one-sided pitch, so to speak. You get it, and you don't have to be a customer actually to even sign up, to ask for a briefing. You have to submit a request, you get a briefing, and that's where they sit for 60 minutes or 30 minutes, and you are supposed to present to them. They absorb it, thank you very much, and you don't really get any feedback, and, shalom, shalom. An inquiry, when you're a customer of an analyst, you can actually have as many of these as you want, and it's basically when you are coming to them to ask questions, and then a conversation starts. So a good strategy starting some analyst relations is actually getting in there and looking at each analyst's research, what they've written recently, and trying, almost like you would do with a reporter if you're trying to pitch a story to a reporter, and say to them, hey, I have some questions that I'd like to get answered and discuss on an inquiry. And you have to submit that information ahead of time. And this way, you're basically coming to ask them what they think about a certain topic. And by the way, you're creating a conversation, and you have enough time on those calls to also kind of have some back and forth and show them that you're smart enough to actually create some value and have a good conversation. Right. So I think a good set of inquiries, knowing their research is very important. Yeah. Almost any call that we have an analyst, we start out by saying, hey, what are you working on these days? You know, what's, because they have their research schedule.
How can we help you?
Yeah, they have their research schedule, and it's almost like an editorial calendar, and tell us what you guys are working on. How can we help? And then once you hear that, you start to say, oh, well, we have a customer that just did such a and also perseverance. I mean, just staying on top of them.
So just to comment on, I guess, on the, on the missing analyst that's gone, gone away.
Right.
I think part of the strategy should be to, maintain a relationship with those secondary analysts as well. That may as well succeed. That
backup.
Yeah, it's your backup plan. And I think, what we have done, over the years is really very clearly identify who the tier one analysts are. Who the secondary ones are, and it could be also peripheral, fields that are, it's someone who does QA, but he's also related to what you do. Yep. So getting in front of those people, they may end up being the lead analyst, and it's exactly what happened, when this guy ended up, with one of our competitors.
There you go.
Yeah. One of those, one of the young analysts became the lead analyst, and that was really,
not only
really
that,
great
but
news.
many times they will work on a report with 2 to 3 to 4 analysts on the same report. Or, for example, Gartner has something they call the hype cycles, which is basically taking a very large industry and looking at it over the course of time and what are the up and coming and where they are in the cycle of a peak versus over the peak, before the peak, etc.
Plateau.
Yes, they have their own terminology, of course, for it, and many analysts have the same thing. I mean, we talk about Gartner and Forrester many times, but IDC is a huge analyst firm as well, and then there are a lot of second-tier analysts that you can't forget, by the way. Yeah. So being in touch with a range of analysts ensure that you get into more and more reports, and that's you basically want to do 2 things. You want to make sure that you're in as many reports as possible. And you also want to make sure that the reports that are kind of razor focused on your industry, you're up in there in the best way possible. So it's really a strategy that can go across a lot of different analysts. Mm-hmm. And just a word on kind of the second tier, so to speak. I mean, there are a lot of analyst firms that are very specific. They go into niche. For example, when we work on the whole cloud TV side of our business, it's really not very relevant to the Gartners and Forresters of the world. They typically don't cover those areas as much, but there are a slew of analyst firms that are smaller or that are more niche that cover that specific area, and we have to stay on top of them just as much as we have to stay on the others. And so I'd say within each analyst firm, you have to map out the analysts that you want to be in touch with, and also within the analyst industry or ecosystem, you have to make sure that you're touching upon all analysts, and then you have to decide where you actually want to invest hard dollars.
All right, so that's my next question. Actually, maybe 2 questions. That sounds like a lot of effort.
It is.
I mean, first of all, how you make that decision that you wanna, because it's like double or nothing. If you do it all the way. How you decide that you're investing in AR for first place, and then when you decide that you invest, how do you decide in which group, like Gartner, Forrester? How do you make that decision?
So many options.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say in general, Gartner is probably the biggest tech B2B CIO type analyst firm. It definitely has the largest user base, and if you ask them, of course, there's no one else. Yeah. So if indeed you're selling a B2B type of solution that ultimately you're aiming for CIOs, IT groups, etc., then Gartner is one that you definitely need to look at and consider seriously. Forrester, over the past few years, they've actually taken a very marketing, customer experience type focus, and they do a lot of great work there. So that's one that if you're kind of more on the customer experience side of I'd say. Interestingly, Gartner really put a big focus on what they call digital workplace, whereas Forrester went a bit more into customer experience. Again, they both cover both, but I'd say that's been their focus. IDC is another one that really kind of goes across the board, but I think the best way to decide which one is most relevant for you is to listen in the market. If you have prospects or customers that are referring to specific reports, then you want to look at those reports seriously. Yeah. If you are seeing in the press analysts that are talking about your space, you want to be in touch with them. And if you're looking at conferences that are relevant to your space and you see analysts speaking at those conferences, those are analysts you want to be in touch with. Now, you don't have to engage with them, to your question. You don't have to engage with them commercially to begin with. You don't have to spend the money. But once you identify that there are quite a few people that have asked or mentioned or whatnot, or you're looking to get an additional angle of credibility that's third-party credibility, you can definitely start investing. Now, many firms don't require a ton of money like some of the bigger firms. I mean, there are firms, and they're changing their business models over time. It used to be that you had to go full in and, have a big subscription. And some analyst firms now, you can just hire to do a report. Like a commissioned report, and they talk about you, whatnot, and it's not $100,000 a year. It's a lot less. It's a fraction of that. So it really depends where you are. And also, of course, if your competition is being included in analyst reports and whatnot, then you got to get in there.
Yeah.
All right.
So how much? Obviously, there's a lot of effort, and roughly, if I'm a startup, just getting started, how much money should I expect to spend on analysts? Who should be involved? As part of this team. There's.
Yeah. I think it's critical that senior management is involved in working with analysts. At the end of the day, most of the briefings and the analyst inquiries that we do, it's either one of our executives or someone who's kind of our evangelist who, is very well versed. You have to know how to speak with analysts. You have to be an industry thought leader. Again, like I mentioned before, providing value to them, you need to know the market. You need to know, it can't be, someone who doesn't really know the industry very, very well, because they need to basically impress the analyst and show that this is a conversation that's going to be interesting to have and a relationship that's going to be worth their while to invest in. So it's really important that senior management is on board, and it's also important because it's almost like the example I gave before, like you don't want to spend all this money on it and then not use it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of effort to set up those briefings and make sure, and it's never, nobody really ever wants to, it's an effort, and they're busy with so many other things, but it has to be something that people focus on. In terms of budget, again, I think sometimes the best strategy is to start small and to work with some of kind of maybe not the huge analyst firms, but actually those more niche and industry specific ones. And you could spend $10,000 to $20,000 on a report together. For example, you can, try out a small subscription, et cetera. It really depends on the business model of the analyst.
Try your luck with free briefings.
For sure. I mean, at the very, very least, you should be submitting briefings at least once or twice a year for every analyst firm that's relevant. Mm-hmm. And many times you can do that as a round of briefings. It's the same presentation, the same spiel, and you can provide that to the various analyst firms. You don't have to invest at the get-go.
Yeah. All right. So we're starting to run out of time. Before we do that...
Oh, well, you got to stop me because I could go on forever.
Can you give us 3 tips or hacks? We can't say that word, but for people that want to start investing in AR now?
Yes. So first of all, research. It's not a fast hack, but it's required. Going in and checking, who's talking about your space and what you're doing, and trying to see if there's any relation to some of the analyst firms, and definitely getting into that. I would say, like we mentioned before, submit a briefing to anyone who's relevant or semi-relevant. Start submitting those briefings. And then I would say that it probably makes sense to start mapping out all the different analyst firms, seeing who, like kind of cross-referencing between the research that you've done and the analysts that you think are interesting, and then finally starting to dabble in, once you have either someone dedicated to it or half, like many times PR and AR will go together, but someone who can invest a bit of time in it, then I would start kind of testing out the waters, if it's with a joint webinar or if it's a report that you pull in, those types of things, and starting to build a relationship with one or two. I'd say that any analyst relations person, unless they're fully dedicated, and here we're talking about typically smaller companies, so it's definitely great to cover a broad range, but then you really have to hone in on one or two that are the most important.
Yeah. And I think a great tip is to really leverage the Israeli offices or the local sales offices of those analyst firms that from experience, you know, they really help you to do this mapping,
right.
Understand who's who, you know, in the analyst ecosystem, at least within their firm.
Absolutely.
And also they've got all sorts of really cool sort of analytics within their platform, so you can see how many times that's what we used to do. You know, this elusive brand awareness. How do you measure your brand strength?
Right.
So
they have a lot of information for marketers that help you.
We used to keep track of, you know, how many times you know our company name was actually searched for within the Gartner platform versus our competitors, and we saw this really great sort of trend that we're sort of catching up to the competition. So you know, it's just the number of times Gartner members actually search for your firm. So that's one thing. The other thing that going back to misconceptions that I see a lot of companies do is companies that simply think they need to have something completely ready and fully baked, you know, to present to the analyst. And I guess my tip here is that don't wait. You know, have this session with the analyst, even if it's not fully baked, and get their take. You know, they want to be involved in the making of, and you want them to feel like it's their own. You know, they can't say the baby's ugly if it's their baby as well. So then just go ahead and do whatever you want.
They can just say it's breathtaking.
Go ahead and do whatever you want, but I think get them involved as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and that's, you know, similar to what I was saying before. The more you can be a resource for them, the more successful it'll be, and the more of a relationship. Find out what they like also as people. There was one analyst who, you know, we realized that he loves ice cream. We brought him to the office one day in New York, and I ordered an ice cream cart.
We will cut that out. Have to
I like ice cream.
I like ice cream.
No, instead of sitting down for lunch, we went to ice cream. I mean, there's no busha in that. No. You know, you find out what they like, and just like any person, and remember that they're people. Yeah. So.
All right.
Lisa, that's been great.
Thank you.
That went by very quickly.
Very.
Yeah.
I could talk a mile a minute.
Thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Cheers.